You're not afraid of being yourself. You're afraid that when you take off the mask, you'll discover there's nothing underneath. Every morning, we approach our collection of masks: the role of a business professional for the office, the role of a caring parent for the family, the role of a fun friend for social gatherings, the role of an erudite conversationalist for meetings, the role of a patient passenger on public transit. So many roles that sometimes we wonder, where in all of this is the real me? Today, we'll dive deep into the world of social masks. We'll explore why we create them, what price we pay for acceptance, and most importantly, how not to lose our true essence behind all these masks. Irving Goffman, the famous sociologist, compared social life to theater, where we are all actors playing different roles. He called this the dramaturgical perspective. But what is a social mask? It's not just a fake face we put on. It's a complex adaptation mechanism that we've refined over years. Remember your childhood. Do you recall when you first realized that certain behaviors brought approval, while others led to punishment? Little Max plays in the sandbox. He joyfully shouts when his castle is successful. He cries when someone destroys his creation. He gets angry and takes back his shovel. All emotions, pure, genuine, unfiltered. Now Max is 35. He sits in a meeting. His project, which he's worked on for months, has just been criticized. He wants to shout in frustration. He wants to cry at the injustice. He wants to slam his fist on the table. But what does Max do? He smiles, nods, says, "Thank you for the feedback. I'll take your comments into account." This is a social mask, a role we play to meet expectations, to be accepted, to survive in the jungle of social norms. We all have several such masks. Professional mask, the one we wear at work, competent, confident, rational. Family mask, the role we play in the family, caring, patient, responsible. Friend mask, our image for friends, fun, open, spontaneous. Romantic mask, our version for a partner, passionate, attentive, sensitive. Public mask, for strangers, polite, reserved, inconspicuous. Each of these masks has its own set of rules, its own body language, its own tone of voice. And often these masks are so different from each other that if you gathered all the people who know you in different contexts, they would be very surprised to learn they're talking about the same person. The answer seems obvious, for social acceptance, but it's much deeper than that. From an evolutionary perspective, being expelled from the tribe in primitive times meant virtually guaranteed death. Our brain still operates on the same evolutionary mechanisms. Fear of rejection isn't just psychological discomfort. It's an ancient survival mechanism. Neuroscientists have found that social rejection activates the same areas of the brain as physical pain. When you're not accepted, it literally hurts. From a psychological perspective, according to Carl Jung's theory, masks are our persona, the part of the psyche that interacts with the external world. It's a kind of compromise between our true nature and social expectations. Jung warned, if we identify too much with our persona, we risk losing connection with ourself, our true, whole I. From a sociological perspective, Pierre Bourdieu talks about social capital, resources we gain through social connections. Our masks help us accumulate this capital by adapting to different social fields. Thus, each environment has its own rules of the game, which Bourdieu calls habitus, and our masks are ways to play by these rules. Natalie transferred from a small creative studio to a large corporation. At the studio, her spontaneity, creativity, and out-of-the-box thinking were valued. She could come to work in bright outfits, suggest crazy ideas in the middle of a meeting, and that was considered normal. In the corporation, however, different rules apply. Restrained dress code, clear hierarchy, formalized processes, and Natalie quickly created a new mask. She began wearing strict suits, speaking in corporate jargon, following corporate etiquette. Does this mean she betrayed herself? Or just adapted to new conditions? Social masks are necessary for survival in society. But what bill does this necessity present us with? When we constantly play roles, we can lose the sense of who we really are. This leads to an existential crisis, which philosopher Martin Heidegger called the forgetting of being. Have you ever returned home after a day spent in society and felt an inexplicable exhaustion? Not physical, but some deep kind, as if someone had sucked the life energy out of you? This is the price of constantly wearing masks. Our masks often require suppressing unacceptable emotions: anger, sadness, fear, frustration. But emotions are information. When we ignore them, we lose important signals. Elena sits at her friend's birthday party. An hour ago, she learned that her project at work was canceled. She's devastated. But at the party, she smiles, jokes, gives compliments. "How are you?" they ask her. "Great," she replies with a broad smile. Meanwhile, the unprocessed emotion doesn't disappear. It remains in the body, creating tension. And this tension over time can grow into anxiety, depression, psychosomatic disorders. When our masks differ greatly from each other, internal conflict arises. Psychologists call this cognitive dissonance, discomfort from holding opposing beliefs. Alexander is a department head. At work, he's demanding, sometimes harsh. He can criticize subordinates, raise his voice, pressure them to achieve results. At home, however, Alexander is a caring father who never shouts at his children, teaching them empathy and kindness. Who is the real Alexander? The one who pressures subordinates, or the one who plays with children? And when masks are so different, doesn't a person begin to feel psychologically fragmented? Psychoanalyst Heinz Kohut talked about the false self, a defense mechanism that forms when a child realizes their true needs won't be met and creates a version of themselves acceptable to others. Over time, this false version can become so dominant that the person loses access to their true self. They no longer know what they really want, what they feel, what they believe. One artist spent his whole life painting pictures that others liked. He became famous, collectors bought his works. But one day, he realized he had never painted what he himself wanted to paint. And when he tried to create something of his own, he discovered he didn't know what his own meant. If previously our masks were limited to physical spaces, now we create digital versions of ourselves that exist constantly, 24/7. In each social network, we create a separate version of ourselves. Professional LinkedIn, idealized Instagram, political Twitter, entertaining TikTok. Research shows that regular use of social media is associated with higher levels of anxiety and depression. And it's not just about comparing ourselves to others, but also the constant need to maintain our digital masks. We create avatars in games, profiles on forums, alter egos in online communities. These digital masks allow us to experiment with identity, but also blur the boundaries of our self. Nikita is a shy student who finds it difficult to communicate with people in real life. But in an online game, he's a charismatic guild leader whom dozens of players turn to for advice. Is this digital version fake? Or perhaps it reveals a part of Nikita that cannot manifest in real life due to social anxiety? Social media algorithms show us what we already agree with. This creates the illusion that everyone thinks the same. This illusion reinforces our social masks, as we rarely encounter information that challenges them. We receive confirmation that our mask is correct. Not all masks are harmful. They become a problem when they differ too much from our essence. When there's an abyss between the mask and the true self, every social interaction becomes exhausting. We don't control our masks, but they control us. When we can't take off the mask even when alone, we lose the ability to distinguish between the mask and the true self. When we forget who we really are. Marina has been a good girl all her life, an excellent student in school, an obedient daughter, a hard-working employee. She always did what was expected of her. At 40, she achieved everything she should have achieved. Prestigious job, good husband, 2 children, apartment in the city center. And then one morning she woke up and realized she felt nothing. No joy from achievements, no satisfaction from family, no interest in work. Emptiness. Who am I? What do I really want? These questions led her to an existential crisis. Everything she had done so far was dictated not by her inner desires, but by external expectations. Social masks are an integral part of life, but how can we wear them without losing connection with ourselves? The first step is recognition, to understand which masks we wear in different situations. Practical exercise. Write down your different social roles, professional, family, friendly, etc. Describe what kind of person you are in each of these roles. Note which qualities manifest in all roles and which only in certain ones. Those qualities that manifest everywhere are closest to your true self. We all need moments and places where we can be ourselves without masks. Andrew is a successful lawyer. Every day he wears a suit, speaks formally, restrains emotions. But every weekend he goes to the countryside, where he does wood carving. There he can be himself, creative, unhurried, spontaneous. This space for authenticity saves him from professional burnout and allows him to maintain connection with his true self. Jungian psychotherapist Robert Johnson wrote about the importance of integration, the process of uniting different parts of our psyche. Instead of keeping our roles completely separate, we can look for ways to bring elements of our true self into each mask. Victoria is a school teacher. At work, she must be authoritative, disciplined, restrained. But instead of completely suppressing her creative nature, she finds ways to integrate it into her work, using non-standard teaching methods, bringing elements of play into lessons. Such integration makes her professional mask more comfortable and less exhausting. Meditative practices help us develop an inner observer, a part of consciousness that can track our thoughts, emotions, and behavior without identifying with them. This observer helps us notice when we're putting on a mask and become aware of the difference between the mask and the true self. Practical technique. 3 steps of awareness. Notice. Realize that you're now putting on a mask. Accept. Understand that in this situation, the mask may be necessary. Separate. Remind yourself, I wear this mask, but this is not all of who I am. Psychologist Winifred Gallagher talks about selective authenticity, the ability to choose when and how to be genuine. Complete authenticity in all situations is impossible and impractical. Wisdom lies in knowing when to adapt and when to remain true to yourself. Sergey is an IT specialist who values honesty and directness. In business negotiations, he decided to be completely authentic and told the client that their requirements were unrealistic and the deadlines absurd. The result? Contract terminated, team without work. After this, Sergey realized that sometimes a mask of diplomacy is necessary. But he found a way to be diplomatic without betraying his values. He rephrases his thoughts but doesn't change their essence. How to find your true self under layers of masks. Jung believed that our true self manifests through our deepest values. Practical exercise. Write down 10 moments in life when you felt truly alive and whole. Analyze what values were present in these moments. Freedom, creativity, connection, learning, etc. The most frequently recurring values are keys to your true self. In depth psychology, there's a concept of the inner child, the part of us that preserves our natural essence before we began creating masks. Practical technique. Dialogue with the inner child. Find your childhood photo, age 3 to 7 years. Look at it and ask, what do you want? What brings you joy? Write down the answers that spontaneously arise. Think about how you can integrate these needs and desires into your adult life. Jung talked about the shadow, rejected parts of ourselves that we don't acknowledge because they don't fit into our masks. Shadow integration is accepting all aspects of yourself, even those society considers unacceptable. Elena has been a nice girl all her life, never getting angry and always putting others' needs above her own. Her shadow was the ability to feel anger and set boundaries. After years of suppression, this energy broke through in the form of panic attacks. Through therapy, Elena learned to acknowledge her anger, express it in healthy ways, and establish boundaries. The result? Less anxiety, more energy, more authentic relationships. Most often we wear masks out of fear of rejection. But the paradox is that true closeness is only possible when we dare to show our real face. Psychologist Brené Brown spent decades researching vulnerability. Her conclusion: vulnerability is not weakness, but the most accurate indicator of courage. When we dare to show our true feelings, our imperfections, our fears, we create space for genuine connection. Vulnerability is not winning or losing. It's having the courage to show up and be seen when we have no control over the outcome. Brené Brown. Terrace grew up in a family where boys weren't allowed to cry. Be strong. Men don't cry. Don't be a wimp. These instructions formed his mask of stoicism. When his father died, Terrace couldn't cry at the funeral. But a month later, during a conversation with a close friend, he allowed himself to show pain for the first time. And instead of rejection, as he feared, he received support and understanding. This moment of vulnerability didn't make him weaker. On the contrary, it allowed him to begin the healing process. Psychologist Kurt Lewin discovered that our behavior is a function of both our personal characteristics and the surrounding environment. In other words, our masks partly depend on the communities we're in. Practical advice: find or create a community where authenticity is valued. This could be a therapeutic group, creative collective, spiritual community, or just a circle of close friends. In such containers of safety, we can practice authenticity, gradually transferring this experience to other areas of life. Research shows that the most effective leaders are those who aren't afraid to show their vulnerable sides. When a leader acknowledges mistakes, shares doubts, shows humanity, this doesn't undermine their authority, but on the contrary, strengthens the team's trust and creates a culture of authenticity. Irina, CEO of a technology company, always wore the mask of an unwavering leader. Never showed doubts, never admitted mistakes, always radiated absolute confidence. But under this mask, she felt constant anxiety, fear of exposure, imposter syndrome, and her team felt this tension, though they couldn't name it. The turning point came when the startup was on the verge of bankruptcy. At a general meeting, Irina did the incredible. She took off the mask. "I don't know what to do next," she said. "I'm scared. I need your help." Instead of losing respect, as she feared, Irina saw her team rally. People began offering ideas, taking responsibility, supporting each other. This authentic interaction saved the company. Paradoxically, digital technologies that have intensified our need for masks can also help us return to authenticity. Anthropologist Michael Wesch studied how people use anonymous online forums. He discovered an interesting phenomenon. Anonymity sometimes allows people to be more authentic than in real life. When there's no risk of social consequences, people can express thoughts and feelings they usually hide. Bodan, an introvert suffering from social anxiety, found a community of people with similar problems on Reddit. There, under a pseudonym, he began to openly talk about his fears for the first time. This practice of authenticity in a safe digital space gradually changed his real life too. If he could be genuine online and receive support, perhaps he could be the same offline. Mood tracking apps, online diaries, meditative practices, therapeutic chatbots, all these tools can help us better understand ourselves and our masks. Practical advice: use digital tools as allies in the search for authenticity, not as another place to create false versions of yourself. Philosopher and programmer Cal Newport talks about digital minimalism, an approach that questions the value of constant online presence. Instead of constantly updating statuses and creating idealized digital versions of ourselves, we can use technology more meaningfully to deepen real connections, not to create illusions. The goal is not to abandon masks completely. That would be impractical and even harmful. The goal is to transform masks from a prison into tools that we consciously use. When we identify with the mask, we lose freedom. When we recognize the mask as something separate from us, we regain choice. Practical technique: conscious switching. Before a social situation, pause. Ask yourself, what mask will be useful in this situation? Consciously, put on this mask knowing you can take it off. After the situation, pause and take off the mask. Return to your center, your true self. Psychotherapist Irvin Yalom talks about therapy of existential authorship, an approach that helps people stop being victims of circumstances and begin consciously creating their lives. In the context of social masks, this means transitioning from, "I am forced to wear this mask," to, "I choose to create this version of myself for this situation." Catherine works in a corporation and must follow a strict dress code. Previously, she perceived this as a limitation of her individuality and felt oppressed. But then she changed her perspective. Now she perceives her business clothes as a costume for a specific role she plays in a specific context. This doesn't deny her bright, creative nature. It's just one of the ways she expresses herself. Such a change in perspective transformed her experience from oppression to creative expression. Social masks can serve not only as shields, but also as bridges. They allow us to find common ground with people whose life experience differs from ours. Psychologist Carl Rogers talked about congruence, a state where our internal experiences, awareness of these experiences, and external expression are in harmony. This doesn't mean a complete absence of masks, but it means our masks don't contradict our essence. Practical advice. Instead of asking what mask will make me acceptable, ask, what mask best conveys my true essence in this context? Philosopher Friedrich Nietzsche wrote about life as art, the idea that we can approach our existence as a creative act. In this perspective, our social roles aren't limitations, but canvases for self-expression. Artists know that limitations often stimulate creativity. A sonnet has a strict form, but in this form, poets create an infinite variety of expressions. Similarly, our social roles have their rules, but within these rules, we can find unique ways of self-expression. Michael is a history teacher in a conservative school. Professional dress code, formal communication, strict curriculum, all this could have become a straitjacket for his bright personality. But Michael found ways to be himself within these limits. His lessons turn into fascinating historical reconstructions. He uses humor to explain complex concepts. He finds parallels between historical events and modern memes. He follows the rules but does it in his unique way. Jazz musicians know improvisation isn't chaos, it's creativity within structure. Similarly, life isn't a choice between complete conformity and complete rebellion. It's finding your unique voice in the context of social melodies. Practical advice: perceive social situations as jazz sessions. There's a basic structure, but within it, endless possibilities for self-expression. Jung believed that the goal of psychological development is individuation, the process of becoming a whole, integrated personality. This doesn't mean rejecting masks, but it means all masks become expressions of a single, integrated self. Metaphor. Imagine your personality as an orchestra. Different instruments, your different roles and qualities, play different parts. The goal isn't to make everyone play the same, but to create harmony where each instrument complements others. In a world that constantly requires us to wear different masks, true freedom lies not in rejecting all masks, but in remembering the mask is not you. Psychologists, philosophers, spiritual teachers of different traditions agree. A deep sense of inner freedom comes when we realize the difference between who we are and the roles we play. 1. Masks aren't the problem. The problem is unconsciousness. When we wear masks unconsciously, we become their prisoners. When we wear them consciously, they become our tools. 2. Authenticity isn't a state, but a practice. Being authentic doesn't mean achieving some ideal state of genuineness. It's a daily practice of honesty with yourself and conscious self-expression. 3. The deepest paradox: complete acceptance of masks leads to freedom from them. When we stop fighting the necessity of social adaptation and accept masks as part of human experience, we paradoxically become more free. The mask is not just what conceals. Sometimes the mask is what reveals, allowing us to see what would otherwise remain invisible. Milan Kundera. Daily practice of mindfulness. Create a ritual for switching between different social contexts. Ask yourself daily, what mask am I wearing now? Does it serve me? Regular space for authenticity. Find at least one safe space where you can be completely yourself. Regularly spend time alone without social stimuli and expectations. Gradual expansion of authenticity. Start small. One authentic expression in a familiar situation. Gradually expand the boundaries of your authenticity. Creative approach to social roles. Experiment with different ways of performing your social roles. Look for unique ways of self-expression within social expectations. Community of like-minded people. Find or create a community where authenticity is valued. Practice vulnerability and honesty in a safe environment. The story of social masks isn't about how to completely get rid of them. It's about how to find your true self among all the roles we play. How to create harmony between social survival and personal integrity. And most importantly, it's a story about how to stop being afraid that under the mask is emptiness and discover that the real you has always been there, waiting for you to finally allow yourself to meet. Now a question for you. Which social mask is hardest for you to take off? Which part of your true self most longs to be expressed? Write about it in the comments. Perhaps your experience will help others find the courage to be more authentic. And if this video resonates with you, share it with those who, in your opinion, also struggle with the burden of social masks. Remember, the greatest freedom comes not when we remove all masks, but when we remember that we are not our masks.